of the exclusive buyer brokerage engagement. State law prohibits broker from representing buyer as a client without first entering into a written agreement. Key terms. This agreement explains what the official contract is as far as hiring a broker to represent the buyer. Georgia law requires this to be in writing before any representation of the buyer can occur. The term of the agreement, when the agreement starts and when the agreement ends. If the buyer goes under contract before the end of the date, the agreement automatically extends until closing. Agency and brokerage. This explains which types of agency the broker does not offer, such as dual agency. If the broker offers dual agency, the buyer must choose whether they allow it. Dual agency is when the broker represents both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. Compensation. This section explains how the broker is paid, who pays the broker, when compensation is owed. Compensation is negotiable. No law sets a specific amount. Buyer agrees to pay the fee at closing unless the seller or listing agent pays it. Buyer must confirm how the broker is paid before making an offer. If the buyer leases a property, a separate leasing fee applies. The protected period allows a broker to be paid if the buyer purchases a home the broker previously. Page 2 of the brokerage engagement. B1 clarifies the buyer is hiring the broker exclusively, not using multiple brokers, or where they may owe a prior broker if a contract from an earlier agreement is still binding. Terms explains how the agreement may be extended if a contract falls apart. 3. Agency and brokerage. Broker offers agency types. This lists the relationship the broker may provide. Dual agency. If the buyer gives permission, broker represents both parties neutrally. Broker must disclose all material facts. Broker cannot share confidential information between parties. Buyer is not required to consent. Buyer's consent is considered informed once signed. Designated agency disclosure. The firm can assign one licensee to represent the buyer and another licensee of the same firm to represent the seller. No other adverse agency relationships. Broker has no other agency relationship that would interfere. And this concludes page 2 of the brokerage engagement. Page 3 of the brokerage engagement. Compensation for professional services of broker. Buyer pays at closing. Even if after the agreement ends, compensation still applies. FSBO, or for sale by owner. If the buyer buys a for sale by owner and the seller refuses to pay the broker, the buyer must pay the broker. C, leases. separate leasing compensation applies. D, protection period. If the buyer purchases a property shown during the agreement, even after the agreement ends, broker may still be owed compensation unless the agreement ended mutually or the buyer signs with a new broker. C, broker's duties. Broker must make required disclosures, try to locate suitable properties, follow Georgia law under brokerage, real estate, and brokerage relationship and real estate transaction act, help negotiate and complete purchase contract. Two, buyer's duties. Buyer agrees to be available for showings, respond to you in a timely manner, give accurate information, carefully review documents and deadlines, work exclusively with you, tell you about any prior brokerage relationships, avoid contacting for sale by owners. And this concludes page 3 of the buyer brokerage. Okay, bottom of page 3, going into page 4. Broker authority and responsibilities. Broker may show the same home to other buyers. You do not inspect property or detect hazards. Brokers do not supervise repairs or construction. Brokers are not responsible for missing deadlines in the purchase contract. Brokers cannot bind the buyer to anything without their signature. Limit on broker liability. The broker's maximum liability is the compensation earned or $100 if no compensation was earned, and a maximum of $100 liability related to wire or cyber fraud. Disclosures. Broker must keep buyer's confidential information private unless required by law. Not only give false information. Tell the truth even if it conflicts with confidentiality. Disclose material facts when needed. 6, disclosure of potential fraudulent activities. Buyer gives broker permission to report suspicious, unusual, potential fraudulent activities to government, agencies, or lenders. And this concludes page 4 of the brokerage engagement. Page 5 of the brokerage engagement. 7, arbitration. Any disputes go to arbitration, not the court. Exceptions: earnest money disputes, broker's compensation claim. Assignability. If the broker is sold, the agreement can be transferred to the new company. C, attorney's fees. The winning side in a dispute can recover attorney's fees. D, broker. Broker is the firm and its affiliate licensees. E, buying property sight unseen. This warns the buyer of the risk. Buyer agrees to hold the broker harmless if they buy a property sight unseen. F, definition of buyer and seller. This includes family members, business entities controlled by them, or anyone purchasing on their behalf. G, foreign ownership restrictions. Buyer is warned about Georgia restrictions on certain non-resident foreign buyer purchasing agricultural or military adjacent land. H, entire agreement clause. This document contains the whole agreement. Nothing verbal counts. I, fair housing disclosure. Broker cannot steer clients based on protected classes. GAR forms. GAR forms are general templates. Parties should review or modify them as needed. And this concludes page 5 of the buyer brokerage engagement. Page 6, K, governing law. Georgia law governs this agreement. L, hazard condition warnings. Buyer must be careful when visiting homes. Hazards may exist. M, hold harmless. Buyer agrees not to hold broker liable for injuries during showings. N, independent contractor relationships. Broker is not the buyer's employee. O, no imputed knowledge. Knowledge as the broker is not automatically assumed to be known by other licensees in the firm and vice versa. P, notices. Buyers must stay reachable. Notices must be in writing and sent to addresses listed. Q, referrals. Broker may refer the buyer to other brokers or vendors and may be compensated for referrals. R, statute of limitations. Buyers must bring any claims against broker within 1 year. S, survival. Key protections survive even after the agreement ends. T, third-party vendor. Broker may offer vendor names, but does not guarantee their work. U, time is of the essence. All deadlines matter and must be followed strictly. V, NA. NA means not applicable. C, buyer default. Buyer must pay broker compensation if they default on a purchase contract. They mutually cancel a contract without the broker's consent, unless still in due diligence. They terminate the agreement early, but buy during the remaining term of the protected period. They buy a property without ensuring the broker is paid. And this concludes page 6 of the brokerage engagement. Page 7, number 9, warning to buyer and seller, beware of cyber fraud. This explains the risk of email scams involving wiring instructions. Buyer must call independently to verify any wiring instructions. 10, warning to buyers regarding identity theft. Because criminals impersonate sellers, buyer agrees to verify seller's identity, to consider enhanced title insurance, not to sue the broker for fraudulent seller. 11, brochures received. This lists the guard brochures the buyer receives with the agreement. The ABCs of agency, lead-based paint, mold pamphlet, the EPA Home Buyer and Seller Guide to Radon. Protect yourself when buying real property. What to consider when buying real property in a community association. What to consider when buying a home in a condominium. Protect yourself when buying a home to be constructed. What buyers should know about flood hazard areas and flood insurance. What buyers and sellers should know about short sales and distressed properties. What to know about buying agricultural land and land near military bases, installations, and airports. Retainer fee exhibit. Special stipulations. Any special stipulations to the contract will be written here. And this concludes page 7 of the buyer brokerage engagement. Okay, we're on page 8 of the buyer brokerage agreement. By signing this agreement, buyer acknowledges that 1, buyer has read all provisions and disclosures made herein. 2, buyer understands all such provisions and disclosures and has entered into this agreement voluntarily. And 3, buyer is not subject to a current buyer brokerage engagement agreement with any other broker. If a licensee is signing this agreement on behalf of broker, licensee warrants that licensee has full authority to sign this agreement and bind broker hereto. Buyer's acceptance and contact information. If buyer is a legal entity, this agreement must be signed by one or more authorized persons as required in the entity's legal documents. The person's signature must include capacity in which the person is signing, such as trustee, general partner, manager, president, etc. Here we have the buyer's information in full. And for this particular example, there's only one buyer. If there was more than one buyer, we would put the second buyer here, and all the information will be filled out. If there is more than 2 buyers, we would click here, attach a digital signature page, which is F146. Broker affiliate licensee contact information. Happy Buyer Realtor is representing the buyer. The agent is Shawna Benoit, and all the information is filled out here as far as the brokerage is concerned. Here, once the buyer signs and the broker signs, this is what we call acknowledgement and agreement. This is the agreement date here, and we will provide a copy to the buyer. And this concludes the buyer brokerage engagement.